So today, which is Friday, the 6th of March, a former partner of McCullagh, she said she was in an on and off relationship with him for around 7 years. She spoke about an alleged assault and she also gave a rough timeline of their relationship. Can you walk me through what she was saying about that assault?
Yeah, so as you said, this is the first time we've heard from this lady who was an on-off partner of Stephen McCullagh for around 7 years. And she was given evidence remotely through the remote evidence centre. And she started by saying that she had been at first friends and then it turned into a relationship. It was very on and off. There were periods she lived with McCullagh in his home in Lisburn, and there were periods she said the good times were very good, but then there were times that were quite bad as well. They would have fallen out and then reconciled quite often, but specifically, she was asked about the events of an incident that happened in December 2019. And at this stage, on the December the 31st, this woman made a statement to police saying that she had been assaulted by McCullagh, and that assault is said to have taken place in the early hours of that morning. She had said the previous evening she'd stayed overnight, so she'd been in McCullagh's house for around 2 days. And during that time, her phone, in her words, was running slow. And so she asked McCullagh, would he have a look at her phone because he was more technically minded than her. And during this time, he found messages and images on her phone that she had been sending to another man. At this point, she said he became upset. He started crying and shouting he was angry. She said he said to her, why would you do this? I thought you loved me. Why would you lie about messaging someone else? She said that she tried to calm him down and explain herself, but this wasn't working. And this went on for most of that day. So the woman said she did try and contact her mother to come and get her. McCullagh asked her would she leave the home, and her mother was unavailable. And so he told her he had to work, but when he finished work later that evening, he would drive her home. She says throughout the day she tried reconciling with him, as she put it. And she even said that sometimes she pestered the defendant. He didn't want to speak to her. She again said she asked her mum to come and get her, but she wasn't available. She talked about an incident where he went out into the back garden for a cigarette, and she says she gently tried to pull him back into the house, and then an argument broke up. She said McCullagh snatched her phone to try and said he was phoning her mother to come and get her. And then later that evening, when McCullagh was giving her a lift home, she lived in the Portadown direction, at around 1:30 in the morning, she said she became upset. And this is the part where I think that people should be aware that what we're going to talk about now are subjects that some people could find really upsetting, because she said she tried to throw herself from a moving vehicle. She said she started to say, I don't want to live anymore. I want to kill myself. And she started trying to open the car door. I believe she did open the car door. She said at that stage she thought her life was not worth living, and that was when she tried to throw herself from the car. She said the defendant pulled her back in, and what she said was, he said, I don't want this to be a murder car. And the woman said that he then slapped her and punched her in the temple. And after that, she said he was angry and shouting at me. And McCullagh, she claims, said to her that she could go and kill herself in her own time.
She said after that she was then brought back to your mother's house where she made a police statement after on her mother's advice. She said he didn't want to talk to me, and then there were times he did talk to me, and then she added that he didn't really want to hear her side of the story. She said, I tried explaining myself, but I think I was making it worse. She said she withdrew that statement. What sort of reasoning did she give for that?
She said then on January the 2nd, 2020, the woman then made a second statement to police, withdrawing the first complaint. And she said she came to the conclusion herself that she didn't want Stephen to get into trouble. She says, because I thought we could reconcile, because I didn't want him to go to prison, she said. And then she said, because back then I thought he was only trying to knock sense into me, because that is what he said. She then said she sought counselling after this. And then we had the second part of her evidence. There was a short break, a comfort break, and then they came back for the second part. And she said that in and around 2021, they had reconciled the relationship again. And then in January 2022, she started suffering from cramps. And she went to the doctor, who confirmed that she was pregnant and sent her to the hospital. But she miscarried the baby. She had a stillborn baby. And after that, she said she was feeling very fragile. She was feeling very upset after the loss of her baby. And in her words, she says, I wasn't coping very well. I was very tearful day to day. I didn't want to get out of bed. I was still in shock. I was trying to understand what happened to me, and Stephen tried to help as well.
So at the centre of the evidence today was recordings that she said were taken while she was taking counselling after the loss of the baby.
Well, interestingly, she didn't know that he had been recording her counselling sessions. We jump forward then until 2023, and remember at this stage police are now investigating the murder of Natalie McNally, and they removed devices from Stephen McCullagh's house. The woman had sought counselling, and some of those counselling sessions took place in Steve McCullagh's house in Lisburn, where she was living at that time. She said during these counselling sessions that McCullagh would either go to the bedroom or he would go outside to the garage because the counselling was meant to be one-to-one on her own. But then in 2023, she was contacted by police who said that when they had removed devices and removed his computers, they found recordings of those counselling sessions that had been covertly recorded. They say his defence obviously said that there was a different reason why those recordings existed. So after this, we heard that the recordings had been placed. She was questioned by John Kearney, KC, who is representing his defence. He's representing Stephen McCullagh, and he quite gently questioned her because the witness was, she was talking about very sensitive subjects and clearly quite fragile and vulnerable. He said, it is right that you've had problems with your mental health generally, and that the defendant his client had tried to help you. Is that right? And she said yes. She also said that you had told him you wanted to kill yourself that evening, the evening she described in the car, so he saved you from yourself. And she said at the time, yes, because he put me back into the car. He also claimed that the counselling sessions, that she would have been aware that they were being recorded.
If we just go back to yesterday when Natalie's neighbours gave their evidence there, what they recalled of the night that she was murdered. The first neighbour was Emil Sossens. What did he say about that night?
Yeah, so he gave evidence to the court, and he said that, as we know, this was the night of the World Cup final. Natalie had been in her parents' house watching the World Cup final. He said that he had also been watching the World Cup final and then watching Netflix till around 8:50. He said when his wife went to put their child to bed. He then said he went to use the downstairs bathroom, and at about 9 p.m, he said he heard some noises, banging and a scream from next door, which he said sounded female and lasted for around 5 seconds. He said he couldn't hear what was being screamed and wondered what had happened, but heard nothing after that.
And then Aisling Henry also said she heard a scream or a noise sounding like a scream.
Yes, that another neighbour, and she had lived facing, and she'd said that Miss McNally didn't usually close her blinds, but that evening they were completely down, and she said that this was unusual. Miss Henry also said she heard a scream which drew her attention. She said it almost sounded like a sharp intake of breath, like a scream. And Miss Henry said she also saw a shadow which looked like a big man or a tall woman, but they were broad. And she said the sound that she heard sounded female.
And this week we also heard evidence from Natalie's family. Now, Gavin Haddock, who is a cousin of Natalie, he gave his experience of McCullagh after Natalie's death. What did he have to say about his experience with him?
Yeah, we had all of the McCullagh family, and people might have noticed there was a dip in reporting during the week. So I could just explain now, because we can talk about that now, what the reason for that was. When members of a family or a group are given evidence at a criminal trial like this, they have to leave the room. They sit in the public gallery throughout the trial, and McNally family have great support, and the public gallery is always pretty packed. But they have to leave while the other members of the family are given evidence, and that's for obvious reasons, so that they don't contaminate each other's evidence or anything like that. But because there was so many members of the McNally family given evidence, and it was going to take 2 days for that evidence to be delivered, the judge had ruled it was safer that if we did not report on any of the family's evidence until all members of the McNally family had given evidence. And so that happened then. It took 2 days of evidence. That included Natalie's father, who was the first one of the family to give evidence, Natalie's mother, and then 2 of her brothers, and as you say, her cousin. He said, we heard that after Stephen McCullagh was arrested on the evening that he claimed the Monday that he said he found Natalie's body. He went to the house because he was concerned, he hadn't heard from her, and he found her body. He was then arrested as a suspect, but quite soon after that, the police desuspected him. They said that he was no longer a suspect, he was now a witness. And so his Natalie's cousin said that he had been to the family home, that on January the 7th, because after this the court heard the McCullagh would call quite frequently to the McNally family home. And so on January the 7th, he said McCullagh was at the McNally family home, and he said that him and McCullagh went to the back garden of the house to smoke, and so he went out and joined him. He said that McCullagh was playing a YouTube video on his phone and said that it was the live stream from December the 18th, because we know, for anyone following this story, that McCullagh originally said that for 6 hours on the Sunday night that Natalie was murdered, he was live streaming a game on YouTube, Grand Theft Auto. So he said, Mr. Haddock said he kept saying, "Look at me playing these stupid little video games," and he said he looked very distraught. He said that McCullagh fast forwarded the video by 3 hours and said that this was around the time that Miss McNally died. He says McCullagh said, "I should have been there to protect Natalie, that no one would have got past him." Her cousin said, "I felt really sorry for him." He said that he had told McCullagh that he had struck gold with Miss McNally, and he tried to reassure him. And this was, as I said, there was quite a few members of the family. I was in court the day Natalie's father, Noel, gave evidence. He said that they had welcomed McCullagh into their home, that as far as they were concerned, that he was a grieving partner, a grieving father-to-be, that he was treated with the utmost respect anytime that he was in their home, that he had dinner in their home. He also talked about Natalie bringing McCullagh home for the first time to meet them, and he said that was on the 30th of October, and he was introduced as Natalie's new partner. And then a short time later, he came back to the house for a second time, and that was when they broke the news that Natalie was expecting a baby. So they had only met McCullagh twice until this happened. The police had told him he was the suspect, so as far as they were concerned, they were being protective of him. They felt that he had no one, because he had already told them that he didn't have any family, that his parents were dead. I suppose one of the things that struck me about the dad's evidence is that he says one of the first times that they had met him, he had said that his parents were dead and he didn't have anyone, and they says, "Would you have family now?" And he was to come to their house on Christmas Day for his Christmas dinner. The thing that he said, as far as they were concerned, they were happy for Natalie, albeit he was worried because she was diabetic. So Natalie's father said his concerns for Natalie weren't attached to the relationship. They were just attached to the fact that she was diabetic, and he was worried that she might miscarriage the baby, or that something might happen in terms of her health. And so that's what he was more concerned about. Although he did say that McCullagh continually, after Natalie died, referred to her as "my Natalie." And he said that did annoy him, because he said, "I thought they have only known each other. You've only known her 3 or 4 months. She's not your Natalie, she's my Natalie." And then we had evidence from Natalie's mum, who said that McCullagh showed her an engagement ring on one occasion. And he also described to several members of the family how he found her, which is what he said is he'd found her face down in a dog bowl.
It was also discussed earlier this week in court about a friend of Stephen McCullagh. She talked about Stephen finding Natalie's body and the phone call that night.
Anne McCullagh, who is no relation, their surnames are spelled differently. She had been a friend of Stephen McCullagh for quite some time, and we'd already heard her name mentioned, so it had already been introduced to the court and to the jury, because on one of the very first days of evidence, a female police officer gave evidence about how she was one of the first responders on the scene. She spoke about how McCullagh was distressed, and she had said to him, "Is there anyone you could ring? Do you have any family?" He told her that he didn't have contact with his family, but he had a friend, Anne, and so this is the friend Anne who was rang on that night. They had tried to ring her, but I think the police officer was ringing her from her phone, which was a withheld number. And so then they rang her from McCullagh's phone, and she did answer. So she was brought through that. She spoke about how she had met McCullagh while they were both studying filmmaking at college. She said they became best friends and stayed in contact over the years. She said that she had asked to meet Miss McNally on her own to get to know her, and that the pair had met for coffee. When asked if McCullagh ever seemed happier given his relationship, she said that he was super happy. And she asked about Christmas and said that he said he was looking forward to it. That McCullagh seemed to be trying to get better at things like cooking and reading up on parenting, and his relationship with Miss McNally was the happiest she had ever seen him. She said Miss McNally challenged him and wouldn't go along with everything he said, and that she was very much her own person, but that they seemed great together, was her actual words. So then asked by Charles McCrainer KC, who is the lead prosecutor in this case, how McCullagh seemed on December the 17th when she dropped Christmas presents off at her house, she said that he had seemed relaxed.
And they're sort of in constant contact, up until and after McCullagh finds Natalie's body.
Yeah, on the night that Natalie died, there were messages read to the court previously, this was last week, where McCullagh finished the live stream, there was a message from Natalie which he hadn't responded to. Well, he said he finished the live stream. We know now from cyber evidence that that live stream was pre-recorded. And he responded to that. And then he had a conversation with Anne, very quite trivial, sort of back and forth between the two of them. And then the next day he had also messaged her to say that Natalie wasn't responding to him, and he thought she might have been angry because he was drinking alcohol during the gaming stream, and he had promised her he wouldn't drink because she was pregnant. So there was quite a few messages had gone on between the pair from midnight on December the 19th until the early hours of the Monday the 19th, and where McCullagh had said he thought he was going to be in trouble.
And this friend was a point of contact for McCullagh after he had found Natalie's body.
Yeah. And, you know, he had previously told the court that he had asked her to accompany him before he to go to visit Natalie, and she had declined. At that stage, she had told him she had other plans, but she told the court that it was Christmas time and she didn't want to be dragged into an argument, and she thought they were just having a bit of a tiff. Later that night, she got a call from McCullagh after he had discovered Miss McNally's body, and a female police officer told her that Miss McNally had died and asked Miss McCullagh if she could come to Lurgan as he was inconsolable.
Do we know what the contents of that phone was, or what way Mr. McCullagh was acting?
Well, she said he was inconsolable, and when she actually arrived at the scene, she was told to go back and sit in the car, and she said she was in shock as her friend and her baby were dead. Miss McCullagh then said she was told that McCullagh was taken in for questioning and that she couldn't go with him. And the next day she saw a news article about how Miss McNally had been murdered, and later McCullagh phoned her to say that he had been released. After his release, she said that Mr. McCullagh told her of his experience in police custody and how he had found Miss McNally. He said he had found her lying face down in a dog bowl and that there was blood, and how she was cold and her lips were blue. McCullagh told her he had rang 999 and been told to perform CPR. When asked how she took this, Miss McCullagh said that there was a lot to process and that she thought she was being a good friend, but she didn't actually want to hear any of it. McCullagh said that she said she'd had nightmares about this since. And then she was asked about McCullagh's rearrest, which didn't happen until January 2023. She said she recalled seeing a news notification that there had been arrest in the investigation into Miss McNally's death. She said she was excited as she thought that the police had finally got the person who had done it, who had killed Miss McNally. And so she tried to call Mr. McCullagh, but she got no answer and thought that maybe he was just with Miss McNally's family. She then got a call from her sister to say that detectives were at her house, and it was only then that she realised that it was actually Stephen McCullagh who had been arrested.
So that wraps up this week's evidence. Do you know what we can expect to come next week?
We do. We're going to hear from some of the messages that were retrieved from Natalie's phone as well, from Natalie McNally's phone. And then I believe there are some other witnesses which have yet to be agreed. I don't really want to go into too much detail because at this stage there are some legal arguments about who we can name and who we can't name, and sometimes that changes on the day. So we'll arrive on the day, the witness will take stand, and then the judge might make a decision that that person can either be named or not named. So I think that we're safer just sticking to what we do for now. And as I said, this trial is expected to last 5 weeks. It's in front of Mr. Justice Kinney, and right now, some of these things, when you sit through these trials, you realise that they're going to take longer or they're going to take shorter, but it seems to be moving at exactly the right pace. So hopefully it'll all run as smoothly as it has been next week.
Allison Morris, thank you.